Hey everyone, and welcome back. We have a different sort of video for you today. We're going to do an interview with Troy Lavigne, who is just a brilliant massage therapist and teacher. He taught me at a class a few months ago called The Neuroscience of Massage Therapy, and it blew my mind. I've been doing this for over 16 years, massage therapy. I've been in the field, and I went home after the first day going, "Oh my God, everything I ever thought was wrong." I had like this, but then it opened this whole world and changed the way I think about manual therapy, the way I approach it, the way I practice. And I'm just so grateful that Troy is here today to share his expertise with all of you. So if you are somebody who has chronic pain, which I know a lot of you do, if you are somebody who's had pain in the past or expects to have pain in the future, watch this because it's a big, big help. So a little bit about Troy. Troy Lavigne is a highly skilled professional in massage therapy, specializing in techniques like kinesiotaping, orthopedic and sports massage, pediatrics, lymphatic drainage. He has a wealth of experience, having served as the director of education for the Colorado American Massage Therapy Association from 2016 to 2023. Troy is also a published author and researcher who hosts a podcast called The Sensory Approach to Manual Therapy, which I'm a big fan of. He started his own massage clinic in Boulder, Colorado in 2005 and has worked with various renowned teams and organizations. In addition, he's provided massage care for children with special needs in India and continues to work with the pediatric population regularly. And Troy is also dedicated to educating others and has developed courses like the Sensory Approach to Manual Therapy. He has taught and shared his expertise in numerous hospitals, universities, and colleges worldwide. And he's here to share his expertise with us today. So thank you so much for being here, Troy.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I don't think I've had my bio read to me in a long time.
I know it's kind of weird, right?
Yeah,
So I was curious,
absolutely.
what got you into massage therapy and pain neuroscience?
Yeah, so it's a great question. My father was a massage therapist, and a lot of people think, well, that's why I got into massage therapy, but it actually isn't, bizarrely enough. Um, I had a comfort around touch and touch therapy from a young age because of that. Um, And my father was more on the energetic side. He's indigenous. He's partially indigenous here in Canada, where I live now. And he spent a lot of time doing shamanistic work. And so I grew up surrounded very much in a hippie community around the energy field. I used to do Reiki. I spent time living in an ashram when I was younger. I went down that road for a long time. And for me, healing was all about energy work, energy work, energy work. And then in 2002, I moved to Colorado from Quebec and eventually decided to go back to school. And I originally had thought about going to PT school or even medical school. I looked at taking my MCATs and I was about to take them. And then I thought, you know what? I actually don't want to go down that insurance restricted protocol pathway. And I wanted to do something that was much more fluid, where I could be a little more independent, do my own thing, still have a version of oversight, with regulations and still be part of healthcare, but also have the freedom to spend a lot more time with my clients. And so decided to go into massage therapy. And I went to the Boulder College of Massage. Loved it. Loved every minute of it. It was wonderful. I worked full time while I was in school full time. That was a little hard, but it was educational to say the least. And I mean, that was 20 years ago this year.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, and I just had that. I had that originally when I started. I had that energy approach to it as well. I would integrate Reiki into my work and energy work, and then little by little, as I moved on in the profession, I realized that was less what I was passionate about. I started getting much more involved with sports orthopedic care. I worked at a gym. I started working for some professional cycling teams, as well as professional soccer teams and hockey teams in the NHL and the MLS. And eventually just came across this idea from Laura Allen about should we be doing Reiki in healthcare? In a wonderful book she wrote called, excuse me, How Exactly Does That Work? Which is a great little book if nobody's read it. And the culmination of it is, like I still do Reiki in my personal life. I just won't charge people for it because I'm part of healthcare. And healthcare is based off of science. Self-care is based off of anything you think is appropriate for you, but healthcare is based on science. So I stopped doing it in my private practice. And the more I started looking at the science-based aspect of manual therapy, I eventually came to this place that you talked about when you took my class, which was a crisis of faith. After about 10 years, I came across finally a website called painscience.com by Paul Ingram, who used to be a massage therapist and is a very good skeptic and a very good writer. And I was reading his website on myofascial release and trigger points, which was like my bread and butter. That was, 95% of my clientele was that stuff. And he kind of tears myofascial release and trigger points a new one in the most wonderfully mind-shattering, crisising way. And I walked away going, I've been lying to my clients. I remember thinking, I've been lying to my clients for 10, 12 years, and I'm glad they got the results, but everything has been based off of some falsehood. So it's just coincidental that they got better, and I'm glad they did, and nobody ever called me out on it, kind of thing. And so I honestly thought about leaving the profession at that point. And then instead of leaving, I decided to look into if myofascial release and trigger point therapy are not what we think they are. And the research is quite conclusive on that. We don't know how it works. So that's the first. You could just say we don't know why it's effective. We know it is effective statistically. We don't know the why. We're looking for the why, which is wonderful, and we can keep doing that. So I remember after having that crisis of faith, and I started saying, okay, well, what is taking place? And that's when I started running down this neuroscience rabbit hole of the brain's interaction with the skin. The summation of everything I teach and feel about massage therapy and all the opinions I have about it is as simple as the brain and the skin are connected, and the best way we can affect the brain is through the skin when it comes to touch. The best way to affect the brain when it comes to non-touch is interaction. And interaction and skin together give us the space for the best healing. That's it. But interaction is key.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. So I know that pain neuroscience is probably brand new to a lot of people watching this. So why is it that when there is pain, a lot of people feel like there's something physically damaged, right? There's an issue in the tissue or something needs to be mechanically fixed. Why is that not necessarily the case?
Yeah, so the first I want to highlight too, I'm not a pain neuroeducation specialist, meaning I don't do PNE. I've studied PNE, I've read tons about it, I've taken classes on it, but I actually don't do it. PNE has a very strict set of guidelines. They have quite clear metaphors and quite clear phrases that we are supposed to use. Not that it's not effective. Like I said earlier, it's one of the most effective tools we have. But it is a little, there are set guidelines, and I'm not a fan of the guidelines, hence why I didn't go to medical school and decided to become a massage therapist.
Well, you did come up with a lot of great metaphors on your own, which you shared with us in class. So,
well, and that's the goal, right? The goal is to create this version of pain-related intelligence through descriptive texts that allow us to be able to stipulate, I'm in pain or I'm in discomfort. It's chronic or it's new. It's sharp or it's dull. As many descriptive words as we can give around pain will actually help us understand it more and more and understand whether or not it's threat inducing or whether it's just uncomfortable. So that's the first thing around PNE stuff. For the idea of where pain comes from, a lot of this goes back to the 1600s. Like our general understanding in medicine, be it physical medicine, psychological medicine, even neuroscience, our general understanding of healthcare in broad strokes still dates very much back to Darwinism. Tree and brain, things like this. This all goes way back into a very long time ago. And René Descartes was a philosopher who presented this idea of pain back in the 1600s that, I cut my finger and there's a pain signal sent from the injury site that goes up to my brain and tells my brain this hurts. And that's become, that was a given in the 1600s. And that didn't really get challenged until quite recently, to be honest. And so all the research we have in the 1800s, the 1900s, even some of the stuff we have nowadays still is research being done founded off that concept. So the idea of getting popular culture to understand pain differently, we're not just dealing with, a mass consciousness. We're also dealing with the fact that thousands and thousands and thousands of papers and professionals and healthcare professionals and professors and university speakers and educators and government agencies have been put in place based on this former concept. Mm-hmm. And it's especially hard to break down because based on that, we still see results. You still take a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory and you have a reduction in pain. The reduction in pain happens to be based off some mechanisms that are still very accurate, but it has nothing to do with the stimulus of pain in the fingertip. What we really see now is that anytime we have an injury, let's say you burn yourself, you cut yourself, you break a bone, pressure, you slam your finger in a car door, it's cold, any version of discomfort in the body sends information to the brain. It's just information. It's not painful, it's not good, it's not bad, it's not anything. It's just information. The brain perceives the information and says, based on my understanding of the information I'm receiving, I'm going to qualify this stimulus as good or bad. If it's good, it's non-threatening. Therefore, who cares? Forget about it. If it's threatening, I should pay attention to it. And if it becomes threatening enough and I pay enough attention, it will be perceived as pain. Because the brain will simply say, I now need to pay attention to this in order to prevent myself from dealing with greater risk. It's easier to say, I cut myself and it hurts, than it is to say, I cut myself, the stimulus traveled up my finger, through my peripheral nervous system to my central nervous system, up through my spinal column to my brainstem, was processed in the brain, perceived as threat, and then send a signal out saying, ow, this hurts. But that is by far more accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know when I was younger, I used to think, well, when I take an NSAID, when I take pain medication, how does it know where to go? Right? Because
exactly.
It's going to the tissue. But no, it's changing the mechanism. Yeah.
It's changing the mechanisms. And most of the things that we have to treat pain actually don't know where to go unless you're dealing specifically with localized or topical analgesia. Most of the things just go, we don't know where to go. Let's just go everywhere. Right. Let's just hit the whole system, numb everything. Who cares? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of safety in that, but there's also a lot of risk that comes with that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I know you mentioned that you see a lot of people when they're sort of at the end of their rope, maybe like they've been through all of these treatments and nothing's working. Why is it that some people would get injured and then they recover and have no pain? And then there are some people who they're trying everything and they're just stuck in chronic pain for months, years. Why would that be?
Yeah, so this is a concept that some people who will listen to might not like. And so the first thing I'll say is you're welcome to not like this information. That's fine. You're welcome to not like it. It doesn't make it less true. You're just welcome to not enjoy it. And that's fine. I got nothing wrong with you not listening to my stuff. The truth is, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson said it best. Science it's wonderful you don't agree with science. It still doesn't make it any less true. It's still just science. You're just welcome to not believe it, but it still doesn't make it untrue. Gravity exists whether you want it to or not. That doesn't actually matter. So when it comes to how pain is processed in the body and in the brain, there's several different components that make up how we go from having acute and subacute pain towards chronic pain. And the old thought process around chronic pain was 6 months. The newer understanding of pain is that at 3 months, probably around 90 days, 91 days, pain has become chronic. And the reason is that we used to think pain as this like structural, in the 60s, the biomedical model presented pain as this structural thing. You have an injury and there's tissue damage, therefore you have a pain because of the tissue damage. But now what we see is because of that threat-induced discomfort, because it's stimulus, and if it's stimulating enough, it becomes perceived as painful. What happens is that when we're in the acute and the subacute phase, we do have tissue damage. If you break a bone, if you herniate a disc, if you have a bad scar, a bad wound of some kind, in the early phases, it is absolutely that previous biomedical model that exists and it's still effective. Treat it as a biomedical model. Heal the tissue, pain should go away. That still exists. But if that tissue recovers and the pain persists, like a broken bone is a great example. You know, a broken bone on average is fully recovered at 16 weeks. Fully recovered. The bone is as strong as it's going to get, kind of thing, 80% of its previous strength. When it's fully recovered, pain can persist beyond the actual break. So the break is recovered, but pain persists. And the question is just why? And so at 90 days, there's this interesting thing that happens in the brain. In the conditioned response to emotions, we call it body budgeting. Some people call it interoceptive in neuroscience. In nutrition and dietary stuff, we call it caloric load. In evolution, we call it caloric load. Different terms for it. But essentially what it is that at every given moment of every single day, our body is consistently trying to consume the least amount of energy possible to perform optimally. And that's because of evolution. So the body, when it comes to evolution, was saying, I don't have enough calories for every given task all the time. So what I need to do is I need to prioritize tasks. Okay, heartbeat, brain function, lungs, digestion, these things become really important. Everything else becomes secondary when it comes to importance. And so when it comes to the calories we do have, we will always try to satisfy our basic needs first. And then after that, if we have leftover calories, we'll start doing higher processes learning and all these other components to it. And so with pain, what happens in the beginning, it's about survival. It hurts, stop walking on your broken leg. Don't touch that hot stove. You know, cut off that diseased limb. In the beginning, pain is about survival mechanisms. It's how do I survive the best? Avoid that snake bite, avoid that tiger claw, avoid that sharp object, whatever it is. So in the beginning, pain becomes a survival mechanism, and we will consume all of our calories through fight, flight, freeze to avoid being in pain. If the pain is unavoidable, broken bone, herniated disc, scar, or something, or an injury of some kind, then what happens is over time, the brain starts consuming all of its calories just to survive and deal with the pain. And after about 90 days, the brain starts going, you know what, this pain, I expect it tomorrow. I've had it for 90 days. On day 91, I will probably still have that pain. So there's a process that takes place in the brain between two different axons, which is a part of our brain called synaptic behavior, where the level of stimulus it takes to engage a certain neuron becomes diminished. It's called a threshold. So it's easier to engage that neuron with very little influence or information as opposed to a lot of information. And you can think of this as someone who's impatient. When you're happy in life and everything's going well and somebody yells at you or gives you the finger on the road while you're driving or yells at you as you cross the street, whatever. Don't worry about it. You've got patience. You've got room in your life. You're not about to be overwhelmed. You're not going to blow up. But if you're really annoyed, you're at the end of your rope, you're completely overwhelmed, and then somebody honks their horn at you, you might go into complete road rage and flip them off and swear and lose your cool and pop your lid. And the whole reason this happens is because your threshold for stimulus, your ability to handle information, is diminished. You have less room in your life to say, I can handle information without feeling overwhelmed. So as our threshold gets smaller and smaller and smaller, it takes less information for it to overwhelm. And when pain has been in our life for 90 days, every day, all day long kind of thing, immersion therapy, after 90 days, the threshold it takes to re-sense that discomfort, that pain, is diminished. So now all it takes is just slightly moving or a little bit of stress, and you'll replicate that sensation of discomfort because of a learned behavior in the brain, as opposed to the actual structural model. So in that subacute and the acute phase, that structural model really has value and plays an important role. But once we move into the chronic phase, that structural model, the tissue damage doesn't seem to be as important. We see with research that the tissue is often healthy and the pain system is still in this hypersensitive loop. And so the solution no longer becomes deal with the tissue as much, and it becomes deal with this hypersensitive loop, which we can still do with touch. You can still do with massage. You can do with exercise. You can do with stretching. It's just, we want to understand that it's not about how you move. It's not about where you touch. It's not about you're lifting that object wrong. It's you're lifting that object within a realm of capability that doesn't engage threshold. You're treating somebody. It's not that I'm treating your quadratus lumborum, that your low back is getting better. It's that I'm treating your back with a certain amount of stimulus that doesn't engage threshold. And that's the big difference when it comes to chronic discomfort as a learned behavior.
Yeah. And I imagine a lot of things can tip that threshold. I mean, just a bad night's sleep. I mean, it doesn't even take somebody cutting you off on the road late for work or anything like that could probably make that pain ramp up at that point, right?
Yeah, we call it allostasis. In psychology, we call it your window of tolerance.
Mm.
And essentially, it's like if you imagine if your listeners can do this right now, I highly recommend it. So everybody go grab a pencil and a paper. I'm going to guide you through a little exercise. I'll give you 30 seconds here. Go grab a paper and a pencil. This is a wonderful exercise. And, you know, I do this with almost all of my clients. Actually, I'd say every one of my clients gets this as an exercise to do. It's usually stuck on the fridge. My kids have this. My wife has this, and I have this at home. It's on the fridge. And we have little magnets that change what our levels are and stuff like this. So for those of you who did get a piece of paper and a pencil, what you're going to do is you're going to take your piece of paper, just draw an empty glass on it, a big empty glass. And then think of your life today. Think of where you are today, how stressed you are. And you got to remember, stress is not positive or negative. Stress is information. The sound of our voice right now is a stress to your listeners' ears. Now, if they turn the volume up to a point where it's painful, it becomes stressful. The same for light. Light is not stressful until it's painful. Pressure, gravity is not painful. It's not stressful until it's painful. So if you think of your life and just where you are with stress, did you sleep well? Are you having a good time? Have you made love recently? Have you had a fight recently? Do you have a good sense of community? Are you safe in your job? Have you been able to eat food? Have you been able to work out? Have you been arguing? Are you not warm enough? Are you not hot enough? Do you have to pee right now? Are you hungry right now? All of this information is stress to the brain. Some of it's background noise and some of it's very present. Let alone add to that every experience you've ever had in your life. Do you have a good relationship with your parents? Do you have a bad relationship with your parents? Do you feel alone in this world? Do you feel loved in this world? Have you had trauma? Is that trauma coming up? Have you had euphoria? Is that euphoria coming up? Do you have an underlying disability or a disorder like, you know, mania or hysteria? Like there's so many things that make up who we are in a given moment. We call that your 90-10. You're 90% your past, you're 10% your present. So if you take all of that into consideration and you look at that jar, if 0 stress was at the bottom and 100% stress was at the top, write a line down and put a number. What percentage is your jar full? And the great thing about this exercise is you don't have to tell anybody about this. You get to just do this on your own. And whatever number you've put it at, that tells us how much room you have left before you get overwhelmed. When you get overwhelmed, when that jar pops over the top, when you fill the glass too much, the first response we always have is the best response. It's pain. And people don't like pain. I've written an article, it's going to be published here in May in the Massage Therapy Journal about the positive aspects of pain. People don't like it, but if you think about it, pain has these incredibly wonderful safety mechanisms built into it. It stops you from hurting yourself. Oh my God, how cool is that? And if you go even a step further, it actually is the reason we're bipedal. Like the fact that we have a spinal column that is the size it is and is able to do what it can, the fact that our bone density is the way it is and our hips are the way they are responses to painful experiences through evolution. So there's all these really wonderful components to pain. The fact that you respond to an infection with white blood cells to go and clean it out is because of the pain, because of that infection. So there's all these really wonderful aspects of pain that people don't like. But when your jar overfills and you have this painful response, think of it as an alarm. It's your brain's way of saying, pay attention. Something right now, and I don't know what that something is, but something is inducing pain in your life. And unless you change your environment, that something will continue to be present. Perhaps that something is wearing high heels. Perhaps that something is having dentures. Perhaps that something is having to pee. Perhaps that something is you need to get out of an abusive relationship. Perhaps that something is you need to give someone a hug. Perhaps that something is you need to work out. You need a massage. Perhaps you need yoga. You need a hot bath. Perhaps you need ice. I don't know what that something is, and it's not my place to know. but something is overwhelming your jar. And when the cup gets too full, the alarm goes off and it can induce pain. And unless we change our environmental context, the pain won't stop. And so oftentimes what the biomedical model approach focuses on, what a lot of therapists focus on, is the thing that overwhelmed the jar. That, the straw that broke the camel's back suddenly is the thing to fix. But you can't forget there's 99 other percents of stuff in that glass that made it fill. The entirety of that jar is why we're overwhelmed, not the one thing over the top. And I think oftentimes people forget that. They think, I just need to change. I just need to go to bed a little bit earlier, and that'll solve all my problems. Especially in our modern world, right? I saw a post today on Instagram. It was said, as you age, these aches and pains you have, these things that you're feeling in your body, it's not because you're getting older. It's just because you need to stretch more. And in the modern world, we love one-time solutions. Oh my God, if only it was simple as stretching. Well, then everybody who stretches would be pain-free. There are millions of humans who stretch who still have pain. So it can't be as simple as just, there's this one thing that is affecting you. It's different for everyone. Yeah. And it's not about the one thing. It's about everything in that jar.
And I could see a statement like that actually being negative or hurtful, because then someone says, oh, okay, so they start their stretching and it doesn't help. Oh no, what's wrong with me? Maybe I'm worse than I should be. Maybe I'm not stretching right. And that probably is going to add to that stress level and fill that jar and then kind of get you in that cycle. It's interesting. You have to kind of watch what you tell people,
Absolutely. And that's why I don't tell people how to get better. I don't tell them why they don't feel good. I say, take this example, go home, put it on the fridge, and every day of your life, look at it and go, where am I today? How much room do I have to be patient with my kids to help them with their homework? Because if I'm at 99% and I have to help my little girls with their math, it's not going to be a good night for anybody. We're going to yell, we're going to fight, they're going to cry, I'm going to get mad because I'm going to go, look, it's easy. 4 times 4 is 16. And they're going to go, but how, Dad? Because they're learning that stuff right now, right? But if I sit there and I look at my jar and I go, oh, wow, I've got 40% space. Oh, yeah, today's the day to sit down and learn a new subject. Today is the day to sit down and have a conversation with my partner that is important, where we both might feel stressed, but that we can have the patience to be safe with each other. Today's the day for me to take on a challenge of working out what I've never worked out before. But on the days where I feel weak, those aren't the right days to do that. Those are the days to sit there and say, what's the smallest change I can make that makes me feel successful? Not what's the biggest change. And I think people too frequently get caught up in, I want to make the big change. I want to make the New Year's resolution and feel better. I've been working out to lose weight now for 3 years. I'm down 15 pounds, which is wonderful and makes me happy. But it's so slow and gradual that at no point can I sit there and say, I know when I started feeling better. I just know that between 3 years ago and now, I feel immensely better. I'm in better shape. I feel better. I look better. My clothes are different. But I can't tell you when it happened. And that's because I didn't go for the immediate fast change. I went for a really slow, gradual change. So now if I wanted to go back the other way, I'd have to do something drastic. Mm-hmm. And drastic changes are easy to pay attention to. Subtle changes are hard to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely dangerous too to say that, because there was an interesting study that was done where they found if you work out in a group, and if that group contains people who are feeling better than you and people who feel worse than you, right? What happens is everybody improves. The people who are in the worst shape, the most pain, the least progress possible, they see some people at the top and they go, oh my God, it is possible to feel better. And the people at the top go, oh my God, at least I don't feel, at least I've improved. Look how far I've gone. And the people in the middle go, at least I'm not as bad as those people. And look, I'm so close to those people up there. So if you work out in a community, everybody needs to be at a different level and everybody progresses, bizarrely enough. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so like when I give exercise programs to my clients, most of them are, okay, if they're going to work out on their own at home, that's fine. They want to work out on their own. But if they want to work out in a group, I always tell them to have diverse groups. Don't just go work out with the best people in the world. Go work out with some of the worst people and the average people and then the best people, and you'll get good results.
Yeah, yeah. I think that going back to that component of it happens gradually, Whereas, first of all, that's what makes lasting change, right? But I think so many people are so impatient. I actually had a client who said, I'm either 100% in pain or I'm zero. If I have a little bit of pain, that's it. It takes up his whole life. So we worked on that. But it also reminded me of a comment I got on one of my YouTube videos where I do calf massage just for tight, achy calves. And somebody said, well, it only feels a little bit better, so I did it wrong. I'm like, that's amazing. You did one massage and it feels a little bit better. That's great. When you do it again, it might feel a little bit better than that. Like celebrate that.
Yeah, you're describing a wonderful concept. In psychology, we call it emotional intelligence. Like my youngest daughter is 6 years old right now. She's about to be 7. And she knows the difference now. But last year, she'd come home and she'd be in a mood. And I'd ask her how she's doing. And I'd say, you can't be mad at me for what I'm saying right now. And she goes, I'm not mad. Dad, I'm not mad. And I'd be like, that sure sounds mad to me. But at her age, her language and her emotional intelligence had mad or happy. It didn't have sad, mad, and happy. Mm-hmm. It didn't have cranky, tired, sad, mad, happy, blissful, peace, joyous, exhausted. It didn't have a variety of emotions. It had an on-off switch. And that's where most people are with pain. I'm in pain or I'm not in pain. They don't realize that in between pain and no pain lies therapeutic discomfort, tension, stiffness, achiness, burning, tightness, numbing, lack of sensation, hypersensation, analgesia, dystonia. There's this wide range of descriptive texts that we can use around pain. And the greater our intelligence around pain, concepts of discomfort, and the more we can distinguish between this is something that hurts versus this is something that feels uncomfortable. This is something that impedes my daily activity versus something that I can work through. It's just an annoying to do so. This is something that hurts, but boy, does it hurt good. Mm-hmm. Right? Like the more we can distinguish words and the greater vocabulary you can, and if you don't have the vocabulary, learn another language on that subject. And if that other language, if you can't learn another language that has more words around pain, make them up. Flugelhorn, make up a word that describes that sensation, but just make sure that you use it correctly. And the more an individual is able to create language around discomfort, pain, whatever they want to call it, the less likely they'll associate their life as painful. And more likely they'll associate progression in their symptoms. They'll start beginning to distinguish between what feels good, which is just a lack of sensation or no sensation. They'll start having a wide variety of experiences as opposed to I did it right, wrong, I don't feel it, I'm only in pain or I'm not in pain. And suddenly their quality of life increases because now as their quality increases, they're able to distinguish between, okay, it doesn't hurt when I run across the street. It's just stiff and I want to make sure I don't hurt myself. So I'll go carefully, but at least I can run. Or it, instead of saying it's painful to bend over, in which case I will not bend over. Instead, they can say, when I bend over slowly, it's tight and it's stiff, but it's not painful. Well, that just means you'll bend over slowly, but at least you'll bend over. At least you'll keep moving. And so that language around, in English, we are I speak French and English, but in English especially, we are very unfortunate in our choice of language because it's very limited compared to a lot of other languages on how we talk about emotion, pain, sensation. Other languages have many more words to describe a single sensation. And in English, we would just say it's that one sensation. And so the more you can create a diversity in your language, the more likely you'll actually find you're less living in pain.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really something we have to do for ourselves because the medical community loves to use big, scary words, pain, herniation, tear, dislocation, like all of the, so there's no nuance.
There's very little nuance, but there's a reason for that. I don't want people to think I'm opposed to the medical community. I'm part of the medical community. It's definitely not helpful. That's for sure. It's definitely not helpful to not have the nuance. The nuance matters, and people forget that. But if I'm a doctor in a system. So here in Canada, we're in the public system. And if the doctor has 15 minutes with me, and only 15 minutes because there's a waiting room full of people, if we spend 15 minutes talking about the nuances of my pain, they're behind schedule and they don't have to do their medical records. And I know I lived in the US for 16 years. I know the system's very similar there. Unless you have a private doctor who spends a lot of time with you, the majority of people who see physicians or clinicians of any kind have a very strict timeline. And that timeline has to be respected because one, insurance billing is 15-minute blocks. And two, as the therapist or the doctor, whatever it is, I have another appointment waiting for me and I can't get behind on this one because it snowballs. And so being short in our language has a place in medicine. It definitely doesn't have a place in your personal experience. When you're journaling, diary, talking with your friends, talking with your therapist who has time to be with you, the nuance takes on a greater role and a greater importance, especially in the self-talk.
I think that's so important for people to realize that just language, and I guess what I would call sensory intelligence, in addition to emotional intelligence, it's more of a sensory intelligence, knowing what feels what way in your body, that just that awareness can begin to decrease pain and increase function and sort of.
And you and I were talking about it right before we started recording, but Adrienne Lowe did a great paper on that called tactile acuity. I can't remember the name of the paper itself, but it was a study done on somebody who had low back pain. And what they did was, person was laying face down on the table, had chronic, non-specific low back pain. And for your listeners, low back pain is a misnomer. We don't use that anymore. We don't say chronic low back pain either. We say non-specific chronic low back pain, because most people who have low back pain have, if we do an MRI or we do an X-ray, you have no reason to have back pain. When we look at these images, it doesn't mean not everybody. It doesn't mean people don't have, spondylolisthesis. It doesn't mean people don't have herniations. It doesn't mean people don't have some version of arthritis or degenerative disc disorder. It doesn't mean that stuff doesn't exist. But the majority of low back pain is chronic and non-specific. We don't know why you have it. We don't know why it exists. It's not because of a tight shoelace, I can tell you that. And it's not because your mouth guard's wrong. It's chronic non-specific low back pain, meaning we don't know why it exists. It could be a multitude of reasons. So one of the things that Adrienne Lowe did was he had this person laying on a table and he took a picture of his back with a grid with 32 squares projected onto it. And then he took a picture of that and he gave the subject the photo. And the photo was a still image, so it wasn't a live feed. And then what would happen was the individual had to look at the photo. And while looking at the photo, he would use a pen with a pressure scale in it to always have the same amount of pressure. And the researcher would touch a box on the back. And the individual looking at the photo had to say what box they're in. So that's box 3 or box 20. And in the beginning of the research, on day 0, I think the accuracy for the box was under 30% and the pain was at its highest. 6 weeks later, the accuracy for the box was above 80% and the pain symptoms were almost completely gone. No other intervention involved. Now, there's a few possible reasons. We have what's called return to norm. Maybe at 6 weeks, that person would have felt better anyways. That's absolutely a possibility. They would have recovered even without treatment. And so there's some variables that would have to be better done in there. But the concept behind what's called tactile acuity, our ability to pay attention to self. If I ask clients to contract their shoulder blades and pinch a pencil on their spinal column and they can't do it, that's a sign of poor tactile acuity or kinesthetic awareness. If I say, close your eyes and touch your fingertips together and they can't do it, that's a poor example of tactile acuity, because they'll do something like this. They'll start, they'll try to eventually find it, but it takes time because they don't have an awareness of where their body is in space and time. We call that proprioception. But oftentimes, the more we pay attention to our sensory intelligence, as you named it, which I like, by the way, the more we pay attention to that, the more we start having an awareness of self and tactile awareness.
The sort of solution is to ignore it just to get through the day, just to get through that work shift, just so they can, go home and take care of the kids.
Such a good question. And it's something that a lot of my clients, like you'd mentioned earlier, a lot of my clients come and see me and they've seen, every therapist under the sun, and I'm their last hope. And I'm not the only massage therapist who gets these words. I know tons of massage therapists get this, where they say, I've seen everybody, and you're my final hope. I've heard good things, and I really hope it works this time. And the thing I tell all of them is the same. I go, my elbow is not more powerful than Rachel's. I don't have a better understanding of anatomy than most other therapists. The human body is relatively similar through most humans. I don't have this magical touch where I can perfectly palpate compared to someone else. I don't have any magical skill sets like that. What I do have is the same thing everyone else has done, with an awareness that it's not effective as we want it to be. And so instead, we need to add self-awareness to it. And that self-awareness can be done through different massage techniques, different exercise techniques, definitely exercise. And so oftentimes, the first thing I'll give most clients who live in chronic pain, the number one thing, and this is backed by research, this is less my personal opinion, more backed by research, is join a community of like-minded individuals who are also experiencing your symptoms. So if you have fibromyalgia, go on Facebook. If you like Facebook nowadays, go on Facebook, find yourself a community of people who have fibromyalgia, and just be a part of the community. If you live with chronic non-specific low back pain, join a community of people who have non-specific chronic low back pain. You can go to pain.com. You can do the International Association for the Study of Pain. They have a free community that you can join. CanadianPain.ca, CanadaPain.ca, the Canadian Pain site has one, the BC Pain site has one, the US Pain site has one, and they have free community forums. When
you have one
people,
on your website too, right?
I have a list of them on my website, that are all free access that people can go to. They're all there, and they can just join them. When someone lives in pain and they feel alone, the pain is amplified, be it through depression, be it through a multitude of other mechanisms that take place. So when we belong to a community, we suddenly feel a sense of hope, and hope has a pain relieving component to it. There's a big thing there. So being part of a community really helps. That's the number one thing I can do. It's also probably the most affordable thing you can do. If you own a computer and you have an internet connection, suddenly this becomes a possibility. If you don't have an internet connection and you don't have a computer, it doesn't mean you can't find one locally. Ask at the public library to put up a notice. Go to your local coffee shop, put up a notice. Do you have chronic low back pain? Come talk to me. Like, communities exist for this on purpose. So that's the number one thing. The number two thing that I recommend people do is move. And that is probably the hardest one for people to be okay with, because they feel afraid of movement. And part of the reason a lot of people feel afraid of movement is because of what we've been told through the past 30 years of biomechanical model of medicine, which is when you do a squat, your knees have to be over your toes perfectly in line. Well, can I swear on this YouTube page or no?
I
That's
never
okay.
up on my channel before. Actually,
I won't then.
that
So I'll just say, these aren't aligned with your toes. Who cares? There are more aggressive ways to say that, but who
family friendly.
cares? Exactly, right? Family friendly. So who cares? If when you squat, your butt isn't perfectly, if you're not hinging and you're not getting the butt wink, who cares? The key thing is move. And what you want to do when you move, be it bending down, picking up objects, be it trying to do stairs, trying to go for walks. The number one thing you want to do is pay attention to sharp pain and grimacy pain. If it's dull, tense, tight, stiff, achy, fatigue, burning, if it's anything that doesn't make you grimace but is uncomfortable, you're fine. I know it's weird and it's hard to live in that moment. And this comes from, I suffered a little bit. I had 2 nails puncture my spinal column when I was 16. I've punctured a lung. I've broken 37 bones. I've had 10 blackout concussions. I've woken up in some guy's arms in the south of France in a trail mountain biking, and I don't remember most of the days still to this day. I have been hit by 4 cars biking. Some at high speed, very high speed. And I live pain-free, knock on wood. I live pain-free every day. Not that I haven't always. I used to live with pain quite a lot. But finding the ability to, and the confidence to move in our discomfort without eliciting a grimace, without eliciting sharp pain, will create fluid mobility in the body. It changes blood flow, oxygen, nutrition, interstitial fluid changes, lymphatic fluid changes, and all of these will bring better health. It helps create a sense of motivation. It can create endorphin and dopamine releases, which are both natural painkillers, but also motivators. It can remove depression. It can create a sense of community. Suddenly you're walking in the park with a friend. Movement, all the research shows us that the best things to enhance, to decrease your chance of dementia and mental disorders as we age, let alone enhance independent lifestyle for 10 years longer, is mobility. 6,000 steps a day, not 10. I know for a long time people thought it's 10,000 steps, but there was a really interesting paper that came out in the Atlantic talking about why 10,000 steps was chosen, and it was completely arbitrary. Researchers said we have to choose a number, so they chose 10,000, and that was it. And this was back in the late 50s, early 60s. But they've shown now that the average number is, if you walk around 6,000 steps a day after the age of 55, including before, if you can, you will live 10 years more independent longer. I mean, that right there is a whole reason to just get out and be slightly active. And, and if it hurts to bend down and pick up an object, pay attention to the type of hurt. If it's sharp or a grimace, you're probably causing damage. It's not a guarantee, but it's a close enough guideline. If picking up an object is tense, stiff, tight, uncomfortable, just pick it up, but slowly. Just move slow. And the more you do it, the safer you'll feel in your movement. So the first thing I would say is belong to a community. That's going to be your number one resource. And the second thing is get out and move. And move, if you can, pain-free, but not discomfort-free, pain-free. And pain is defined as a grimace or sharp. Those are two very broad stroke definitions, but it's a good baseline.
And if you continue moving with this discomfort, can you expect that to decrease over time now that it's becoming less of a threat?
Yeah, absolutely. So it might not be that it's actually decreasing in statistical terms, meaning if we were to actually take a numerical value and say, okay, my pain hurts this number, X, whatever it is, that number may not change. But what we see is the disability associated to the discomfort is diminished. Mm-hmm. So the pain may stay the same, but we feel safer to perform our activities, even if that discomfort is present. And so, so somebody says, oh, I haven't run in 10 years because it's painful when I run. Well, now they may say, I run even though it's uncomfortable, but I don't see it as a pain anymore. Or the pain hasn't changed, but I notice it's also not getting worse when I run. So all of a sudden your activity level increases and your pain levels stay the same. Well, that means keep doing the activity. It's not related to your painful experience. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the biggest thing we say, and that really we see that with PNE is that disability is diminished more than necessarily pain changes. But that's where manual therapy and exercise therapy really help. They can start help reducing that pain.
So that's good. So manual therapy, how that comes into play. We do a lot of self-massage on my channel as well, and I know a lot of people see massage therapists. Would you say that it should be really strong and kind of has to hurt and be uncomfortable to be effective?
What a leading question. Only because I know you took my class. So the number one thing that we see with manual therapy that is quite outdated, and we see this with exercise therapy, and I'm not calling out any single massage therapist. I'm not calling out PTs, DCs. I'm not calling out anybody in particular. Across the board, the idea, the no pain, no gain theory has been debunked. We see it in exercise. That's not how we do exercise therapy anymore. We see it in performance. That's not how we do performance growth. It doesn't have to be no pain, no gain. And in manual therapy, that's absolutely true as well. Anytime a client on the table, be it through self-massage, which is really hard to hurt yourself doing self-massage, by the way, because your brain naturally tells you to not do that. But anytime you're doing... I'm
surprised how many comments I got. Oh, I
so
tried this and it hurt.
They're overriding. Either they don't have the language to distinguish between hurt and something else, or they're really overriding their system. Yeah. So the key thing is any version of manual therapy that is making a client feel guarded, protected, or grimacing is actually causing some version of harm. Now, it's probably not harm to the tissue. They're probably not breaking collagen because they're probably not going strong enough. It takes a lot of force to do that. They're not breaking bone. They're not hurting a tendon or ligament. Not that we can't, but they're probably not. What they are doing, though, is they're hurting the nervous system, not physiologically, not touching a nerve and causing damage, but they're creating this loop in the nervous system where they're diminishing the threshold because the brain is perceiving manual therapy as a threat-inducing experience. And so when receiving manual therapy, it's important that we go to the threshold, but we don't surpass it. So you don't want to feel the grimace. You don't want to feel sharp pain. You want to get really close to a grimace in your pressure and then just stay right there and wait for it to diminish. That's probably the best way that manual therapy helps. And what we're doing with that is we're resetting the threshold. We go to a grimace, we stay there. Over time, the brain says this is no longer threatening because we never actually attained a grimace. And as the brain stays there and says this doesn't hurt, we simply, when we're ready, we go deeper. And now the brain doesn't perceive this level of stimulus as threat-inducing. And we stay there, and then we go further and further. And session after session after session, we find we can use more pressure with less threat-inducing responses. And so that's probably where manual therapy has the most positive effect on the tissue component. We treat clients and we give them a sense of, okay, this is the level of threshold I can sustain, pain-free, not discomfort-free, but pain-free. And then from that, they go, so when I go work out, I should be able to replicate that level of tissue stress without discomfort. So what I tell a lot of my clients and most of my students is our job as a massage therapist is not to help our clients' tissue feel better. It's not to help, to get rid of a muscle knot, which, let alone if they even exist, which they probably don't, big spoiler alert. What we really do is we give our clients the safety and confidence to move, and then they go move. And if you think about it, there are 200, I think it's 268 hours in a week, something like that. You see your client for maybe 1 to 1.5 out of the week.
Yeah.
Those other 260-ish hours are far more valuable for their recovery than the 1 to 1.5 they saw you. What you do is you hold them accountable. Did you do your exercises this week? Were your exercises feasible? Could you do your exercises? Do we need to change them? Do you enjoy doing them? Should we have you do exercises that are actually fun for you to do? Did you do them? Are they fun? Are they feasible? How much did they hurt? How frequently did you do it? And you know what? Today we're going to make sure that when you do them, you feel safe doing them. And then they go and they do them on their own. And that's not specific to massage therapy. That's specific to manual therapy and touch therapy. And so manual therapy's goal is to give safety and confidence for people to do exercise and move. And the exercise and movement is where they get better. Mm-hmm. But we give them the confidence to get over that first hurdle.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, because I think a lot of times when we're kind of stuck in the biomedical model, we're very passive, right? As people in chronic pain, you feel like there's something wrong and I need XYZ to fix it. I need something external. I need this pill. I need this doctor. When really you could be should be a very active part of your recovery. I mean, most of it can come from you, even depending on what's going on. So I think that's a really important point. And I think some people that I see, at least, are reluctant at first to get active because they're sort of still set in the someone else needs to do this. But once you start doing things for yourself, it is incredibly empowering. And you just get a sense of confidence, and you realize, like, oh, I can have some say. I have control. This is my body. I can do things. So I think that's a real key is you've got to help yourself.
Yeah, and you bring up two really good conflicting points, which is a large part of healthcare is prescription based. For good reasons. I don't want people to think that I'm not a fan of medicine. I'm a fan of medicine. When you need it, you need it. But it is based on someone else having knowledge that you don't have and giving you the solution. Now, there are scenarios where that really has an important role. When it comes to somebody living in discomfort or in chronic pain, the problem becomes someone else might have more knowledge. Like you and I have more knowledge than some of your listeners on some of these subjects. Some of your listeners may have more knowledge than we do on these subjects, but everybody has more knowledge about their own experience. And so it becomes this thing where an outside source is telling you what to do, but the inside source is saying, but this is how I feel. And so listening to yourself becomes hard. because you still want that validation from someone else. There was another study that was done where it showed that if you receive the diagnosis versus a prognosis, the prognosis without a diagnosis, you are 30% more likely to get better. So if an outside resource says you can get better, and here's how, without telling you what the problem is, you're more likely to get better than if you only know what the problem is. So it leads this thing of the validation of improvement becomes important, but not the validation of disease, not the validation of problems. And so when it comes to empowering, you're not wrong, but it also leads to that thing of, if we go back to that jar example, how much space do I have in my jar to take on more power?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want somebody to tell me what to do. And in the beginning, that's often the role of a manual therapist or a personal trainer or a physical therapist of some kind, or an exercise guru or whatever it is, right? They end up starting in a position of, I'm going to guide you.
Right.
So in that role, that person's in charge and the client is in a passive role. But if that role doesn't change, you need to get out of that relationship. Mm-hmm. That professional relationship is no longer one that's after your health, it's after your wallet. A healthy professional relationship is one that in the beginning takes the reins, but in the end, you're in control. Mm-hmm. Once you have the mental space, the emotional space, the spiritual space, and the physical space in your life to take on the responsibility of self-care, you should be able to do it. And then the therapist is only there in the background. This is where I do my monthly checkups. Once a month, people come in and we just check in on them. We check where they're doing, make sure everything's going to plan. And then they go away for a month and they're on their own. And that's where a good therapist will lead you. And so I really think good healthcare in manual therapy and touch therapy in the beginning involves us cocooning our clients and showing them we're there to help them. But in the long run, that they're there to take care of themselves and that their solution does not involve us. Their solution involves themselves. And then we're there to make sure that they just stay safe.
Right, right. And it's baby steps. You slowly hand over power. Like you said, if you try to take all of that, you're going to increase your stress. You're going to overflow
and you're going to have no guide. You're not going to know where to go. What do I do next?
Right, right. So it's baby steps, little at a time.
A lot of therapists will give exercise programs. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I ask my clients before I give them an exercise program is, will you do it?
Right.
And if they go, no, why would I give it to them?
Right.
I'm wasting their time. I'm making them feel guilty because they're not going to succeed. I'm making them feel like failures. So the first thing is they have to be wanting. They have to buy into the idea. And two, the program you give them, if you say, okay, you have frozen shoulder, I want you to go ahead and do this with your arm and lift it above your head, and they have frozen shoulder, they can't. They're just not going to do the exercise because I can't do it. When what you're trying to say is, the goal is to get to here when you're healthy, lift it as high as you can for the moment. Mm-hmm. But if you don't use those words, if you show them programs that are infeasible, then shame on us as therapists. Right. And that's where, if you're still expecting a result and you're not doing your self-care because it's unfeasible, not motivating enough, you hate it, you hate working out in a gym, you'll never go in your life, well, then you still need another therapist to help guide you through better programs, something that you will do. If you like swimming, it's get them in a pool. If you like walking, get them outside, right? Like, have the programs be something that they can do and will do.
Right, right. And I remember you even mentioned sort of fitting it into daily life. So if you want to practice raising your arm here, put your toothbrush on that shelf or something, or a dish, something that you regularly need to reach for, so it
exactly
incorporates into your daily life, and you don't have to think, oh, I have to do my exercises now. It's
people who want to stretch their hamstrings, right? Stop sitting down to put your shoe on.
Right. Down. Yeah.
As long as you don't have pain with it and don't fall over, if you don't have a risk of falling over and it doesn't hurt your back, by hurt, I mean grimace or sharp pain. If it's just a tension, a stiffness, a tightness or your hamstrings, but you can stand up to put your shoe on that way. Like, there are things you can do in daily life to stress your injuries in a way that is not threat-inducing, but stressful to them, and in a healthy way.
Yeah. So could you tell us a story, maybe, if somebody's watching this and they're just out of hope, maybe a story about somebody who came to you who was hopeless and in chronic pain, and a success story of how that went?
Yeah, there's a few of them. I'm trying to think of one I have one recently, actually, that is a little more Significant. I have a client right now who I'm seeing who I saw for the first time in 2023. I saw her once, and when I saw her, um, we did about we had an hour session. We did about 45 minutes of education and 15 minutes of exercise. We didn't do any touching. There was no massage. She came back in 2025, and um, turns out that in the first session she hadn't informed me of this, and I had asked, but I'm not a psychologist, so I can only ask so many leading questions before I delve into out of scope of practice. But this time when she came in, she informed me that she had and for your listeners who are triggered by trauma, I would probably push pause at the moment and not listen to the rest of this if you're not interested in it. The story I'm about to tell is very personal to this lady. I'm not going to use names or anything, but it's also very real and it's a sign of success, but it's also quite emotional and traumatic even. So she was a victim of incest at a very young age. And so she came and saw me this year for treatment. It was the first time she was alone in a room with a male therapist or male of any kind in 25 years, let alone the first time she was touched by a male in 25 years. Every therapist she's ever seen, every physician, every doctor for the past 25 years has been female. Now, there's a whole lot of work that took place prior to her coming to the clinic. It started with, as simple as, do you want the door open or closed during your session today? Trauma-informed care, things like this. She's someone who came in with quite a bit of neck pain for a multitude of reasons, car crashes, things like this as well. When it came to treatment, I did a total of 4 sessions with her. And by the end of the 4th session, she was pain-free. And I'd say the majority of the work I did was very mild, very soft, very slow. All of it was permission-based. She was clothed the entire time. And none of it was deep work. None of it was fast work. None of it would have been what I would have historically called therapeutic. None of it would have been like orthopedic, sports heavy, things like that. Definitely not what I used to have done, myofascial release and trigger point therapy. But yeah, and she's been pain free now for the first time in her life for 20 days at this point. Now I'm still in the process of seeing her. What we're dealing with is not her vertebrae. We're not dealing with the ligaments. What we're dealing with for someone like that is a sensation of discomfort that is based on mental, emotional, spiritual, and physiological stressors that make her feel unsafe in the world. And when she feels unsafe, her neck becomes the focal point of her discomfort to try to say, stop feeling unsafe, go lay down in a dark room where you are safe. And so we are increasing her capacity and her threshold to feel safe in the world. And we'll see where it continues going. And those stories, honestly, they're a dime a dozen for most therapists who have done any kind of work similar to this. There's that one. There's a few others as well with some professional athletes. I had a professional athlete. She was a world champion for Sky Marathon Running Series, which is ultra runners, and she was running in Norway. Her name is Hillary Allen, and she was running in Norway. I have a podcast with her, and she tripped and she fell down a 150-foot cliff, scree field, broke many, many bones in her body.
I think I gasped at that point in the podcast. I was just walking on New York City streets and I just stopped and was like, what?
No, it was pretty intense. And this would have been in 2017. And her and I had been working together for a little while. And she came back. She spent a lot of time in Norway at the hospitals. And she came back to the US. She had a lot of other surgeries as well to do more stuff. And I was the first person to touch her body in a non-surgical way. When it came to, as a therapist, I was the first one to touch her scars and to treat her injury in a way that wasn't surgery related. And she had a lot of chronic pain at the point. She'd been in pain for an extended period of time just through surgeries for more than 3 months. Now she's back to ultra running and she's doing very well and she's running her races again. And 10 months after her initial injury, she was running races again and winning. And a lot of it has to do with this idea that we don't have to, you can't treat pain with pain. You can't treat aggressive behavior with aggressive behavior leads to more aggressive behavior. Tolkien said it best, evil begets evil. Like if you want pain to be treated, be nice, be soft, be caring. Those are like the best beginning steps to anybody who's living with discomfort. Be nice, be soft, be kind, be caring. Um, how would that not be the solution to pain? And yet, for a lot of manual therapists, we think we have to be aggressive to the tissue. It doesn't mean I'm light. My work goes deep, but it's deep within permission based levels. It's deep within communication levels.
Yeah, and for a specific reason. So how, this might be a tough one, how do people seek out a therapist who's knowledgeable in pain neuroscience and doesn't just do the myofascial release trigger point sports massage? Where do we find them?
Wow, good question. I've taught all over the country. I'll be teaching in Thailand this year. I've taught all over Canada, all over the US. I'm taught in Jamaica. I'm starting to go international, which I'm really excited about instead of just North American. But I've taught a lot in the US. And so people can always go to my website, troylavigne.com. They can send me an email and just ask me a question. They can listen to my podcast. They can, if they ask me, hey, I live in this area, any students who've taken your class in that area, and if I've been in that area, I will remember, and I will gladly send out some feelers. But start with educating your therapists. The best way is if you have a therapist who you love and enjoy, and if there's nobody in your area who does this stuff, but you think it's the right way to go, listen to the podcasts that I have, Sensory Approach to Manual Therapy. Educate yourself on pain management techniques. Belong to these communities, and you will learn techniques that help. And then introduce them to your therapist. Don't be passive in your healing. Tell your therapist, you know what? I don't want to be sweating on the table anymore, because that's not a sign of progression. I want the treatment to be present but not uncomfortable. I don't want to fall asleep on the table anymore. Science shows us that being unconscious during this session is less beneficial for pain. Now, not for relaxation. So remember, this is about pain management. So if it's for pain, don't fall asleep on the table anymore. Change the music up. Be engaged. Laugh during your sessions more. So there are ways to help educate your therapist while saying, hey, during the session today, I'd like to put on a comedy station that I like, that you like, that nobody's offended by. And we're just going to laugh during the massage today. The benefits of laughter for pain are pretty substantial. So educate your therapist on what you want. And for any massage therapist listening to this, reach out to Rachel, reach out to myself, because then we can be the sources of that community in the founding of it, in the beginning of it. Pain neuroeducation is one component to it, but I don't want people to think that that's it, because if they do go see P&E, pain neuroeducation, they won't get what we're talking about here, because they'll get a strict set of guidelines and metaphors, which is still effective. But just educate yourself on how to treat the body pain-free, and then introduce it to your therapists.
And I'm sure that people's minds just went comedy during a massage, because we have a very set idea, right, of what a massage therapy session looks like. So this is just opening a million doors. Like, wait.
Some of my favorite sessions are John Mulaney sessions. I've really enjoyed a good John Mulaney. That during a massage, and everybody giggles. There's so many good comedians out there, and you look at Sarah Silverman, and you can go on, and they all have this ability to make us laugh while we're in discomfort. And, laughter is a natural painkiller.
Yeah.
Laughter is a natural painkiller. So you'll just have less discomfort.
That's wonderful. So what would be, so we talked about a lot, your 3 top key takeaways for our viewers from today's discussion?
The first would be, if you are living in chronic pain, the first thing to pay attention to would be join a community of people who are also experiencing similar pain. So if it's plantar fasciitis, join a community of people who have plantar fasciitis. I promise you it exists. They are out there. I promise you. Secondly, become nuanced in your descriptive texts around your discomforts and your pains. Become highly intelligent around your language of discomfort. Don't limit yourself to, ouch, no, I feel fine. Don't limit yourself to, I have no sensation or it hurts. You should feel good. It shouldn't be a lack of sensation. Lack of sensation is paresthesia. You don't want that. It should be, I feel good, and then a variety of other sensations. So become language intelligent in nuances around the sensory system and the pain system and the emotion system. And then lastly, when it comes to massage and when it comes to manual therapy, remember the goal of manual therapy, the goal of any version of touch therapy, if it's for pain, is to make you feel safe enough to move. But the solution is in the movement. The solution is not in the treatment. The treatment gives you the confidence and accountability to move, but your pain-free recovery comes from movement. Those would be the three things I think are the most important for most people.
That's amazing. That was awesome. Wow. That was wonderful. So I know you said a little bit about your podcast and your website. Do you want to tell us more about where we can find you and what we can learn from you and how we
Yeah,
can support
just
you? And
definitely the most information I have is on my podcast, Sensory Approach to Manual Therapy. It's on all the platforms. I just hit 5,000 listeners today, which is insane. I never thought I'd have enough stuff to draw interest. I didn't think people would care enough about that. Secondly, troylavigne.com. And I have two sections there. I have an education portion and a client portion. Under the client portion, you can find my pain information, pain management stuff. There's some great videos there about Lorimer Mosley. There's some pain facts. There's some communities there. All the links are there to join. There's some good research papers as well that I've got open access to. And then on the education portion, there's a pain class that people, if they want to, it's 150 Canadian, but they can take it. It's a 2-hour class. It is good for credits if you're a therapist, but if you're not a therapist, a lot of my clients actually still pay it and they'll listen to it, because the more you can understand the science of pain, the more those nuances start mattering. And that's just there. It's called Pain, the Other Four-Letter Word, which is the name of the class. And they can go there. Otherwise, I'll be traveling around the country teaching, and my schedule's there. And if ever they're in the area and they're interested, I often get together at dinner at nights and stuff like that with students and people in the area who are interested in talking about pain.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I know your schedule is crazy busy, so I really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak to all of us today. And just thank you so much. You shared a wealth of information, and I know a lot of people are going to benefit a lot from this video. So thank you
Well,
so
I'm
much.
I'm really happy and grateful that I got to be here with you guys as well. And I got to say too, to you, I'm really impressed with what you're doing. I was watching your YouTube page, and I think it's really impressive to see the amount of dedication and self-care you give to it, because I think oftentimes it's really easy as therapists to not want to give away information for free,
Hmm.
because we feel like our time, often as manual therapists, we equate our time to a dollar amount, a dollar for a dollar, 60 minutes for $60, in massage, and depending on where you live. And so a lot of people, they don't want to give that information away for free, but, knowledge should never be paid for. Knowledge should always be free. So I'm glad you have such a great page that offers people so much guidance on what they can do on their own at home to feel better. And I think about the people who can't afford care, and like, what a good resource. So thank you as well for what you're doing. It's super impressive and really cool.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's neat to be able to reach such a huge audience when you only see so many clients a week. It's pretty small compared to when you get onto the internet and you can reach out. So it's a privilege. It's really nice. Well, thank you. Thank you again so much, Troy. This has been awesome talking to you.
Thanks so much, Rachel.